Hey, I thought in this short video I'd go through some of the stuff in great song Big Railroad Blues. J Darks has an excellent tab for probably the most famous version of that, the one that probably people know the best, which is off of the Skull and Roses album from around '71. But there's some extra pieces in there, particularly what Weir does. It's really a way of showcasing what a unique rhythm guitarist Weir is. So let me first just go through the introductory riff that Garcia does and show you some of the moves that he makes, and then we'll look at what Weir does and show you how it in important ways mirrors stuff that Garcia is using as well. Now what I think is helpful to do is to think about the opening riff as really having two parts. There's the part that he plays every time the song starts, and then there's the part that really varies. And the part that varies is the stuff he's doing basically waiting to begin the verses. And sometimes that'll take a while, and sometimes it'll just launch right into it. He does different things in it, so I'm going to break it up into two different parts. It's a bit arbitrary, but I think it'll help understand the structure by looking at it in two different parts. Let's just go through the opening riff slowly. Start on the E to the F sharp. So two A's pulled off to the G. And on the low A. Now what he'll do sometimes is he'll do some double notes. Once he's done that, then the next part is to start off with that low, we got the low E ring, sorry, the low A ringing. And then there we go into what I was calling part two, where he will change it up from version to version as he waits to finish the intro and head into the vocals. So sometimes there we'll get something like this. Where we keep returning to that mid-range A. Other times he'll work off of the lower A and then move back and forth between the higher and the lower. So such as starting on the second part. Alright, so let me do a little bit faster and show you some of the different ways in which he approaches the introduction. Now the final Garcia riff that I want to mention is probably the one that people associate with that song, in addition to the opening lick. He uses it on occasion. Some songs he uses it a lot. Some versions he doesn't use it a whole lot at all. In fact, in the Skull and Roses, he really saves it mostly for the lead break, namely this one. Or sometimes he'll emphasize it slightly differently. Where we've got an E bent up to an F sharp, and then back down to an E, B up to a C sharp, down to an A. Now what's important is, when we get to what Weir's doing, he's going to use that little riff as a staple throughout. Over the different chords that get played, he's going to return to this riff. Where it's F sharp, E, C sharp, A. So again, while Garcia is doing, on occasion, Weir is going to be consistently doing, and that adds a nice mirroring to their different playing. All right, so let's approach this as if we were just an ordinary rhythm player. Basic blues progression with a turnaround. So we have, I'll play with an A7, put A or A7. My mama told me, my papa told me to. See, mama told me, my papa told me to. Now, of course, Weir is not going to do something expected, which is what makes his playing so unique and interesting. Even in the early days, he was already doing innovative stuff, often a combination of chords and single lines, which really makes him really just an unusual rhythm player. Always been a kind of rhythm player along with some lead elements. So what does he do over those different chords? Over the A, over the D, and over the E. How does he deal with them? Well, for the A and the intro, we're just going to get kind of a... Off of that one, off of the A, he'll just make use of this simple riff. That little lick is going to wrap up and be the concluding riff he does off of every chord. So even when he's doing other riffs, he always ends with that one. So when we get to the D, sometimes he'll just go back to that straightforward sort of main riff. Other times, off of the D, he'll do something like this. So. And how about the E? Well, the way he plays the E, I think, often is he'll use an E5. So instead of sliding all the way up, say to the 7th fret, for his E, he'll do an E5. Sometimes he'll then throw in a D. So that little riff that we were doing off of the D, sometimes he'll do it off of the E. Always ending on that little basic one that we use off of the A. Other things that he uses off of the E. Sometimes so let's put the piece together. I'll do it slowly, because it's important to be able to get the timing right, and there's a lot going on. So let's just imagine we're just going to slow the pace way down. So just as a concluding thought, when you're doing the A, Think about just getting the E and the A in there. So too, when you're moving up to the D, work off of the fourth and the third strings. So think about getting a stockpile of licks and then using them in different order, and really just making sure that every time you go through it, you always end on the, whether Garcia is mirroring it with the high version or not. Now, a perennial problem when you're trying to figure out Weir's parts is finding a version where he's not buried in the mix. The Skull and Roses version is great for Garcia. You can hear Weir, but you gotta struggle. But a really nice version where you could hear Weir very clearly is 10-19-71 at the University of Minnesota, I think it is. So check out that version if you really want to hear a good Weir prominent in the mix version. All right, so I hope that was of some use. Take it easy.